So in the last class, we were trying to talk about compaction, and while discussion, we have started talking about what are the different lab tests and field tests by which you can carry out what is called as your compaction. And then we started talking about we started introducing what are the different lab tests by which we can determine the maximum dry density that we can achieve for the corresponding optimum moisture content. So in the case of what is called as your standard Proctor test. And we have also said it's not that we have only what is called a standard Proctor test. We have also got the other type of test, which is called as your modified Proctor test. So why is this modified Proctor test came into existence means, so during the time of World War II, so where there was a necessity of construction of runways, where are the airways or airfields, where heavy that particular airfield for which the runway is to be constructed, they were supposed to be carrying what is called as heavy aircrafts. Okay. So for the purpose of your World War II. So during that time, then US Army Corporation of Corps of Engineering, okay, US department went on to modify that particular compaction test, what is given by Proctor, and which is later referred as what is called as modified Proctor test. So this modified Proctor test is for a better representation of the compaction required for airfield to support heavy aircraft. So wherever you wanted your ground to have more amount of compaction than that of what is specified according to the standard Proctor test. So in all such particular cases, like in the case of your airfield, runways, or maybe your highways or other places, wherever your heavy amount of compaction is required. So in all such cases, we try to carry out for determining what shall maximum dry density of that particular soil, what you can achieve. So for that, we try to carry out what is called as a modified Proctor test in the lab. So this modified Proctor test procedure, everything remains the same. How the test is to be conducted, what we are doing, everything is same as like that of your standard Proctor test. But with certain standard specifications, we have a change. Okay. So in the case, when it comes to the case of standard Proctor test, we said the standard weight of the rammer or the hammer which we are using for carrying out the compaction in the mold is 2.5 kg. But whereas in the case of your modified Proctor test, the weight is 4.5 kg of hammer or the rammer weight we are going to be using. In the case of your standard Proctor test, you had a standard free fall height from where the rammer was being dropped, that is of 307 mm. Approximately, we consider it as 300 mm. But whereas in the case of your modified Proctor test, the height from where the rammer or hammer is going to be dropped in order to cause the compaction, in order to induce that compaction in that particular soil. So the free fall height is 457.2 mm. Approximately, we say 457 mm. And the number of layers in which we are going to be compacting the soil in your compaction mold, here in the case of modified Proctor test, is 5 number of layers in which we place the soil sample, and we will be compacting each of the layer by giving a standard number of 25 blows. In case if the mold used is of volume 1000 cc, once again each layer we are going to be compacting it by giving 25 number of blows. In case if the mold is of a bigger size, in the last class also when we have discussed about standard Proctor test, we said in method A, method B, we will be using 1000 cc volume of your mold, whereas in your method C, we will be using 2124 cc volume of your compaction mold is used. In such case, if you are using such mold, okay, either in standard Proctor test or even in the modified Proctor test also, if that mold is used, then we go on to give 56 number of blows for each of the layer. But if it is standard Proctor test, only 3 layers we place there. But if it is a modified Proctor test, we give, we place the soil in 5 number of layers, where each layer is compacted for your 56 blows. Okay. Yeah. So if I want to calculate how much energy is getting transferred on your soil sample while carrying out your compaction, so we have already talked in the last class also while discussing your standard Proctor test. So amount of energy being used there for carrying out the compaction is equal to, we said, number of layers in which the soil is compacted into number of blows given for each layer into weight of hammer or rammer into height of hammer or rammer from what free fall height the rammer is falling. This total divided by your volume of the mold. Okay. So whichever mold you are using, whether it is a smaller mold or a bigger mold, doesn't matter. So whichever mold it is, so accordingly we can try to calculate the amount of energy which is getting induced on the soil, induced in the soil in order to carry out the compaction in the case of your modified Proctor test. So test procedure, everything remains the same. The pattern of how the blows are to be given in the case of your modified Proctor test. Okay. So if it is a bigger mold, this is the pattern of giving the blows. If it is a smaller mold, we have already seen like one blow here, another blow here, third, fourth, and then accordingly we give fifth, sixth, and then we continue to give more and more number of blows, 25 number of blows per each layer. So we are going to be placing the soil in the mold in 5 layers, each layer compacted for 25 number of blows. If it is a 1000 cc mold, if it is 2100 plus cc mold, we have to give 56 number of blows for each layer. Yeah, so depending on the diameter of the mold, the volume of the mold is going to be depending on the weight of the hammer. Anyhow, irrespective of what size of the mold you use, weight of the hammer and the height from where the hammer is going to be released, they are going to be standard. Number of layers in which the soil is going to be compacted is also standard. So depending on the size, we accordingly say number of blows that are to be given for each layer would be either 25 or would be either 56. Okay, the same case of reference, like method A, method B for what particular type of soil we go for, method C for what type of soil we go for in the case of modified Proctor test. So what is the difference between the standard Proctor test and modified Proctor test? In standard Proctor test, the amount of compaction effort that we are giving is less when compared to that of your modified Proctor test. So we already had a similar kind of compaction curves that we have compared. So where you had 2 different compactive efforts given on the same soil sample, and we have seen how does your maximum dry density varies with regard to its corresponding water content. So similar kind of curves. This curve is for your standard, this curve is what you are, this compaction curve, what we are indicating here is from the standard Proctor test, and this compaction curve, what is indicated is from your modified Proctor test. And what is clearly understood is, as the compactive effort is increasing from standard Proctor test to your modified Proctor test, then obvious that your maximum dry density, what you are achieving from modified Proctor test is higher than that of maximum dry density what you are achieving from your standard Proctor test. But however, when it comes to the OMC value, the OMC what you get for modified Proctor test is less than that of, okay, the OMC value from modified Proctor test is less than that of the OMC value what you get from your standard Proctor test. Already we have talked in the last class what is the basis for why is that we come across this difference in OMC values. So a simple comparison with regard to the standard Proctor test and modified Proctor test. Next, in the field, how do we carry out our compaction to achieve that so-called maximum dry density as per your lab test what you have conducted? Okay. So for achieving this compaction in the field, you have got different equipment by which you can carry out the compaction in the field. Okay. So most of the common types of equipments which we are going to be coming across in the field for carrying out the compaction relatively on a bigger area is smooth wheel rollers is one type of equipment what we come across. Other is pneumatic rubber tied rollers, sheep foot rollers, and vibratory rollers. These are broadly different types of compaction equipments which we'll make use of in the field to carry out the compaction. And sir, can I use any equipment on whichever type of soil or whichever type of ground? Means not exactly. Some type of equipments are very much effective for a particular type of soil. So accordingly, we have to use that particular type of equipment to make to get more effectiveness to your compaction what you are trying to achieve in the field. Yeah, smooth wheel rollers basically, whenever you are talking about, are suitable for proof rolling, the surface rolling of your subgrade soils, and for finishing operations of your fills. Whenever you have some soil deposits placed, and if you want to compact such kind of soil deposits, then you can go on for what is called as your smooth wheel rollers. And typically useful in the case of your sandy and clay soil deposits. And these rollers provide what is called as 100% of complete area being covered while the compaction is carried out. Because of this roller being rolled over the surface of that ground, so you will not have any chance by which you are going to miss some area where the compaction is not properly done, because the roller could not be taken through that region. No such kind of issues we will encounter, because the roller drum is relatively spread over a longer width. So if the roller is rolling over that surface, you can ensure that 100% of the area is being covered under the wheel, under the rotating drum, so that your compaction can be achieved. But these particular rollers are not very much suitable for producing high unit weights of compaction. In the sense, whenever you wanted to have more amount of compaction to be achieved in that particular soil, so the smooth wheel rollers may not be very effective in achieving that higher densities in the field. In the case of soils which are compacted relatively with thicker layers in the sense, instead of placing the soil sample in smaller thicknesses and rolling it, if the soil sample placed is relatively of more thickness there, and if you are trying to compact it with the help of this smooth wheel roller, so it may not be very effective in carrying out the compaction. Yeah, when you look at your smooth wheel rollers, sometimes smooth wheel rollers, how they will be, how do you have that equipment means you will be having a smooth revolving drum in the front, and you might have rubber tied wheels on the back side of that vehicle, or in some cases both front and back you are going to be having the smooth wheel rotating drums only. Okay, so as this is this type of technique, whatever we are trying to talk about, your smooth wheel rollers, as mentioned, is going to be effective both for your sandy soils as well as your silty soils, or maybe to that extent clayey soil deposits also. Next is pneumatic rubber tied rollers. Okay, so whenever you wanted more amount of pressure to be transferred onto the ground in order to have higher densities to be achieved, okay, so in such cases it would be preferred to go for your pneumatic rubber tied rollers. So what is that we have got in this pneumatic rubber tied rollers means, so you have rubber tires which are going to exert excess pressure on the ground, and due to that higher amount of compaction can be achieved. So pneumatic rubber tied rollers are better in many respects than the smooth wheel rollers. The former are heavily loaded with several rows of tires. So in the case of your pneumatic rubber tied rollers, you have more number of tires which are going to be rolled over the surface of the ground, and these tires are closely spaced. Generally 4 to 6 tires will be there in a particular row when this particular equipment is taking up the operation of your compaction. So pneumatic rollers can be used for sandy and clay soil compaction again, but however the compaction what you are achieving by a combination of pressure and kneading action. So tire, when you look at your rubber tire will have your projection in the sense the grip of the rubber tire would be there. So that would cause what is called as a kneading action, and when this rolling is subsequently happening in the rubber tire, then it also indicates you the pressure is getting transferred and subsequently pushing your particles relatively to deeper surfaces, so that you achieve a better compaction when compared to that of your smooth wheel rollers. So this is how typically the pneumatic rubber tiled roller looks like. You have some series of rubber tires which are aligned in a particular row, and they are going to be rolled over the surface of the ground where you wanted to achieve your required compaction. Next is sheep foot rollers. Already in the introduction I have talked about in the previous class. When you look at a sheep foot or a goat foot, if you look at, so how does it look like? It has got some projection. Foot particularly has got some projection. So whenever you see either your cow or a sheep or goat, whenever the animal walk on the surface of the ground, sometimes you might see some impressions formed on the surface of the ground. So what does that impression mean? So because of the extra projection of your sheep foot or your cow food or any animal food, so the soil grains which are coming in contact with that extra projection, they get pushed into the ground relatively below the surface of the ground, because of which you achieve a relative better compaction in that particular soil. So these sheep foot rollers are going to be more effective type of compaction equipment in the case of your clay soil deposits. So whenever you have clay soil deposits in which you want to have a proper compaction to be achieved, so we prefer to go for what is called as your sheep foot rollers. So sheep foot rollers are nothing but, once again, you are going to have a drum, okay, but with that particular drum is going to have a kind of projections. Now what does that large number of projections does means, whenever that projection comes in contact with the soil, the projection tries to push the soil grains relatively more deeper into the ground. Okay, so these rollers are most effective in compacting your clay soils, and the contact pressure under the projection can range from 1400 to 7000 kilopascal. Due to that higher contact pressure what you are just trying to induce wherever your extra projections are coming in contact with the soil, so you can achieve what is called as a relative higher compaction for the soil which is being compacted. That's a clay in the case of clay type of soil. So if you want to achieve a better type of compaction in the field, you can go for this. So these are your extra projected thorns or projected cross sections which I am trying to talk about. Whenever the roller starts rolling, then that extra projection penetrates into the ground, while this extra projection, when it is trying to penetrate into the ground, the soil particles whichever are coming in contact, they will be pushed relatively into the ground. In the process, the bottom layers gets more densified in the starting phases, and then upon densification of the bottom layer relatively, then you will have your top layers subsequently getting compacted. Yeah, this is how typically the equipment looks like. Next is vibratory rollers. So these vibratory rollers, already we said it is going to be more effective in the case of your gravelly soil deposits or your coarse grain soil deposits. So the mechanism involved in this is nothing but you try to induce the vibration into your roller. So because of the vibration with which the roller is roller is once again rotating there. But what is happening is, due to the frequency or the vibration what you are trying to generate there, so your so-called coarse grain particles, whatever are existing there, will be adjusted into the fine grain particles because of the mechanism of the vibration what you are trying to induce there. So more effective in the case of your coarse grain soils. So vibratory rollers are extremely efficient in compacting granular soils. Okay, vibrators can be attached to your smooth wheel or your pneumatic rubber tied or maybe your sheep foot rollers. So along with that, if the vibration mechanism can be introduced to that, then you can achieve better compaction for that particular soils. So while carrying out the field compaction, there could be various factors that could influence the amount of compaction that you can achieve in the field. So what are the different factors that are going to be affecting the so-called compaction that you are trying to carry out in the field? So we already know that whenever we wanted to talk about the amount of compaction that you are going to achieve, so basically the compaction would depend on various factors, like already as we have discussed, it depends on the weight with which you are trying to compact the soil, and it depends on the number of layers in which you are trying to compact the soil, and it also depends on the type of soil, what you are in which type of soil you are carrying out the compaction. It also depends on moisture content. How much is the moisture content that is existing in the soil? Because we have seen higher the moisture content in the initial phases, the amount of compaction what you are going to achieve is also going to be increasing. But furthermore, addition of water content beyond OMC will not give you what is called as a further higher compacted state of the soil. Rather, you are going to be seeing relatively lesser density achieved for that particular soil. So yeah, as already mentioned, so your factors what would govern the field compaction is thickness of lift. Thickness of lift in the sense, lift means layer. So what is the height of each layer that you are going to be placing there in order to take up the compaction, and the intensity of pressure, how much pressure you are trying to apply through your compacting equipment in order to carry out the compaction, and the area over which that particular pressure is applied. So if the area what is there is more, and if that particular load is to be distributed relatively over a large area, then the intensity of pressure what gets transferred is going to be less. Whereas the same load, if it is to be distributed relatively over a smaller area, then load by area, if you calculate, then the pressure what is coming from your compacting equipment onto that particular relatively smaller area is going to be high. If the pressure applied is more, then the amount of compaction achieved is also going to be more. So we need to understand obviously what are those different factors which are governing in the process of achieving a better compaction in the field. So these factors are very important because the pressure applied at the surface decreases with the depth. What is going to happen is, when I say the load whatever I am trying to apply on the ground, let's say this is my surface on which the load I am trying to apply is some 100 kilonewton load is what I am trying to apply over this complete area, which is at the ground surface. Now what is going to happen is, now these soil grains whatever are there, I am considering this to be the soil. Okay, so one soil grain which is in contact with its bottom soil particles, one particle comes in contact with the adjacent particles, and one particle will distribute the load what is taken by it onto its adjacent particles. Similarly, all the other adjacent particles will start distributing the load onto its own subsequent adjacent particles which are in contact with that particular particle. So as you move into deeper and deeper depths, what is going to happen is, the load initially which was said to be acting on smaller area starts getting distributed relatively over a large area, and as you move on to the deeper and deeper depths, same intensity of load what was acting here over a small area now gets distributed relatively over a larger area as you move into the deeper depths. So as the depth, as the area over which the load is being distributed is increasing, as you move into deeper and deeper depths, then the intensity of that pressure distribution or intensity of the stress what you are trying to induce into the soil into deeper and deeper depths starts decreasing. Then the amount of compaction what you achieve in the deeper layers is significantly less when compared to that of your top layers. So that's the reason why we say do not compact your soil by placing in higher lift in the sense higher thicknesses at a time. So rather place it in smaller thicknesses of soil layers and then compact it, so that you achieve a better strength for that particular soil with a proper compaction being carried out in the field. During compaction, the dry unit weight of the soil is also affected. Whenever I am trying to talk about how much dry unit weight you are going to be achieving for that particular soil being compacted, it also even depends on the number of times the roller passes over that particular surface. So number of times that you try to roll your roller over that particular surface, if 10 times the roller is rolled, I get some density for the soil. If 20 times if it is roller is rolled, then I get some particular density. So it also, the amount of compaction what you are going to be achieving depends on the number of times that particular roller is trying to pass over the surface of that soil layer which is being compacted. The dry weight of a soil at a given moisture content increases to a certain point with the number of roller passes. Okay, so for some water content which is added, how much generally water content that we try to add means the optimum moisture content is what we try to add to the soil in order to achieve what is called as your maximum dry density. So for achieving the best maximum dry density, so it depends on the number of times you roll your roller, then accordingly you are going to get the maximum dry density or maximum unit weight for that particular soil. So what general specification that one has to follow when we are going to be carrying out your field compaction? In the field, what is that criteria that we have to satisfy in order to say, okay, my compaction that I have achieved in the field is sufficient enough? Okay, so from the lab, we are saying, we are determining what is the maximum dry density that I am required to achieve for a corresponding optimum moisture content. Now in the field, am I going to achieve, am I going to verify for getting the same maximum dry density in the field? Okay, what is suggested is at least 90 to 95% of the compaction I have to achieve. In the way, at least 90 to 95% of your maximum dry density, or let me put in the other way, the maximum dry density what I achieve for the soil compacted in the field should be at least 90 to 95% of the maximum dry density whatever you have achieved for that same soil when it is compacted in the lab. Okay, so from the Proctor test, whatever maximum dry density that you have got, so at least 90 to 95% of that value I have to achieve when I say proper compaction is done in the field. If 100% is possible, you can get that, but at least you have to carry out your compaction minimum to achieve 90 to 95% of the compaction in the field. How do I understand whether 90 to 95% of relative compaction is achieved or not? So I can calculate what is called as this R, capital R here refers to that of relative compaction. So what does this relative compaction mean? It is nothing but it is the gamma D value for the soil which is compacted in the field divided by the maximum dry unit weight or the maximum density that you have got for that particular soil from your lab test, that is from your Proctor test. What is the maximum dry density or the maximum dry unit weight that you were supposed to be getting for the soil sample? It will be there in the denominator, and in the numerator the density of that particular maximum the dry density of the soil whatever I am going to have in the field. So that dry density if I determine and if I calculate that ratio, so this ratio is what we call it as your relative compaction, and that is what we are saying. At least we should target to achieve 90 to 95% of your relative compaction achieved for your soil sample in the field. So sometimes whenever you are trying to talk about your relative compaction in the case of your coarse grain soils, so that relative compaction in the case of coarse grain soils can also be represented or indicated in terms of what is called as your relative density of that particular soil. So this is that correlation what we can try to derive or get it. Okay, so in terms of your relative density and the relative compaction. So if I know the relative density of that particular soil, then I can accordingly say how much amount of relative compaction that you have achieved for that particular soil compacted in the field. So you should not have confusion between the word relative density and relative compaction. Relative density is different, relative compaction is different. Relative compaction talks about how much compaction is achieved in the field when compared to that of the compaction what you have been targeted from your lab test. How much you wanted to achieve and how much you have achieved. So that relation will be understood from what is called as your relative compaction. Now, once we say I have carried out my compaction in the field, then next job is to understand how much is that density or what is the unit weight of that particular soil that is compacted in the field. Okay, so how do we determine that particular unit weight of the soil which is compacted in the field? So we have got different types of tests by which you can determine the unit weight of the compacted soil in the field. Okay, so some of those tests is what we are listing out here. One of such tests is sand cone method, another is core cutter method, another is rubber balloon method, and nuclear method, and various other methods that are available for determining the field density of the soil. Nowadays, very advanced equipments have also come up available in the market. Now, with that also, we can try to determine the density of the soil, what is there in the field. Okay, so we'll just try to have an idea of what is this sand cone method, which is also otherwise called as your sand replacement method. Okay, the sand cone method can also be called as your sand replacement method, and the other type of method is your core cutter method, which are very commonly used in the field for determining your field density of the soil. Okay, and other type of methods which can also be used is your rubber balloon method and nuclear method and various other advanced equipments by which you can determine the field density. Let's look at your sand cone method, or we also call it as your sand replacement method. So what do we do in the case of this sand cone method means, wherever, let's say for example, this is my ground. For this, the soil which is there here, I want to find out the density. Okay, so what is the density of the soil? What is existing in the field? So I want to determine that particular density. So in the case of your sand cone method, what we try to do is, I'll just show you that equipment, what we use in our lab for carrying out this sand cone test or sand replacement test. Okay, say on that particular surface, I am going to place this plate which has got a hole in between. Okay, on the surface of the ground, I am going to be placing this plate. And as you have a hole in between, now once this plate is placed on the surface of a properly leveled ground, so on that particular surface, I will be placing this plate, and from the center hole, I will be digging the soil. Whatever the soil that is visible to me through this particular hole, I will be digging it at least approximately to a depth of some 10 to 15 centimeters, if possible. Try to dig the soil into the ground. Okay, and whatever the soil that you are trying to dig, you should not throw it. You have to properly remove that soil what is being excavated from the pit what you have made, and please collect that particular soil in a tray. Okay, now what is the purpose of collecting the soil in a tray? Okay, whatever the soil that you have collected from the pit which you have excavated, we are going to determine the weight of that particular soil. Because if I want to determine the unit weight of the soil which is there in the field, how do we determine the unit weight? Unit weight is nothing but weight of the soil by the corresponding volume of that soil. Okay, so here what we are trying to do is, we are trying to, in the case of your sand cone method, if this is my ground, okay, so assume this to be a flat ground. Now what I am trying to do is, I am trying to excavate some soil like this. Soil from the ground is being excavated. Now you have a hole inside the ground. Now what are we going to do? That hole is what I am going to fill it with what is called as sand. Okay, so how do we fill it? This is exactly what we are calling it as your sand cone apparatus, or we call it as your sand replacement apparatus. So what do we do in the case of this sand replacement apparatus? Mean, you could see a hollow cylindrical cross section inside. This hollow cylindrical cross sectional portion, we are going to fill it initially with sand completely, and then we close it in tight. Once the sand is filled inside this cylindrical mold, you have an opening. If you want, you can see at the bottom of this, you have a conical shaped cross section. Okay, a slit is available there at the bottom. You can see an opening available at the bottom. If I try to open this lid, if I am opening this lid, what I could see is the hole, whatever is there at the bottom of this cylindrical mold, will get opened. Then once the hole gets opened, what is going to happen is the sand which is filled inside this mold will freely start flowing into that particular opening which you have created by digging the soil. Okay, so what is ultimately happening from this particular test is, as the sand starts flowing into that particular pit, to what extent the sand will continuously flow into the pit? Sand will flow into the pit only to that volume which is equal to the volume of soil which I have excavated, or to the volume which is equal to the volume of the soil which I have removed from that particular pit which I have excavated. Okay, now initially itself I know what is the total volume of the sand which got filled into this container. And now when the trap, this we call it as the trap opening, once this trap is opened, what I see is sand is freely flowing through the opening what is available, and it flows only to certain time until all the void spaces or the opening whichever is there inside the pit are getting filled with your sand. Until that, you see that your sand is freely flowing. And once the sand, once you see that there is no more further flowing of your sand particles happening from this container into the pit, then you can close this lid. Once you close the lid, then you can happily go back here to measure what is the height of that sand layer which got replaced from this container into that pit. Once I know what is the height of that sand layer or sandy soil which got replaced from your cylindrical mold into your pit, then I can accordingly say already internal diameter of the cylinder is a constant value. So height is known, internal diameter of the cylinder is known. Then accordingly I can say how much is the volume of the sand which got replaced from that particular container into the pit. So our ultimate objective is to calculate what is the volume of this particular pit which we have excavated in the ground. I just want to know what is the volume of this pit. Now, how do I know what is the volume of the pit? Because if I want to determine what is the field density of the soil, field density of the soil is nothing but weight of the soil by volume of the soil. Weight of the soil, how do I get? I know how much soil has been excavated from the field without missing any soil grain particles. I have to collect all those soil grain particles properly after excavating, and that soil has to be measured. I have to take it for determining the weight of that particular soil what has been excavated. So once I know what is the weight of the soil, next objective is to find out what is the volume of that particular soil which has been excavated. But here from this sand cone method, the volume of the soil which has been excavated, what we are trying to determine is by an approximation only. It's not very accurate way or accurate approach by which the volume of that soil excavated is being calculated, because the density of the sand which is there in the container is different from that of the density of the soil which is exactly there in the field. But however, for an approximation, for a simple approach by which if you want to determine your volume of that particular soil which is being excavated from the pit, so I can simply say that the amount of volume of sand which got replaced from this mold into the pit is equal to the volume of the soil which has been excavated from the pit. Okay, so weight is known. Now I understand how much is the volume of the sand which got replaced from this container is known into that for filling that sand into the pit. Okay, so weight is known. Now the volume is known. Automatically it tells me what is the unit weight of that particular soil. And from the soil which has been excavated from the ground, if I can take some piece of soil sample for determining the water content that is present in that particular soil, excavated soil. So once the water content is known, then I can go ahead in calculating what is your dry unit weight of the soil or the dry density of the soil, which we can simply write it as the bulk density by 1 plus W, where W is indicating you the water content, how much is the water content that is present in that particular soil which has been excavated from the ground. Okay, so that's how you can try to determine what is the dry density of that particular soil which has been compacted in the field. Okay, so where this particular sand cone method is relatively very much suitable in the case of your coarse grain soil deposits. Okay, whenever the soil in which I am trying to determine your field density. So if that particular soil is relatively coarse grain soil, okay, if I consider that to be coarse soil, then this sand cone method is going to be relatively a better test. Even in the case of your fine grain soils also, your sand cone method is going to be considered as relatively effective one. But however, the other method which is said to be commonly used, like the core cutter method, cannot be used in the case of your coarse grain soil. Okay, it is going to be effective only in the case of your fine grain soil. Next, moving on to the other type of test, that is your core cutter method. So in the case of core cutter method, what do we have is you have a hollow cylindrical mold, okay, of standard dimension, and this is what is your hollow cylindrical mold which I am trying to talk about. What we do is, wherever you want to, for whichever soil you want to determine your field density, so I'll reach to that particular site location where already the compaction is done. I'll be taking your hollow cylindrical mold, I'll be placing it on the ground, and on top of that hollow cylindrical mold, I am going to be placing, on top of this hollow cylindrical mold, I am going to be placing what is called as this dolly. Now, what is the purpose of this dolly means? You are going to be applying the external loading on this hollow cylindrical mold to push that mold to penetrate into the ground. So I am going to be, in the process of this core cutter method, what ultimately we are going to do is, we are going to be pushing your hollow cylindrical tube or mold into the ground. When I am going to push that mold into the ground, what is going to happen? The mold, if you look at the bottom, it has got a sharp cross-sectional edge, so that your mold can easily get pushed into the ground when you are applying some external loading on top of the mold. So by applying that external loading on top of the mold, you can try to easily push your mold into the ground. So in the process, when the mold or the tube is getting pushed inside the ground, the soil is getting entered into that particular mold. Soil, whichever is there in the field, is relatively getting entered into your mold. Now, for ensuring when I am trying to push the tube from the top, I have to give some blows on top of your mold. I have to give some blows from the top. Then only your mold can easily penetrate into the ground. So in the process, when I am trying to hit the mold from the top, there is a possibility that the top edge of your mold gets damaged. So that is the reason why, in order to protect your mold from any failures because of the external load what you are trying to apply with the hammer, okay, so we try to pack your top of this hollow cylindrical mold with the help of what is called as a dolly. Dolly is nothing but a protective cover, a kind of a cap or a lid. On top of this lid or on top of this packing or on top of this cap, whatever lid that I am trying to talk about, okay, on top of this we will be hitting with your hammer. Okay, so once we start hitting the dolly with the hammer, dolly in turn pushes your hollow cylindrical mold into the deeper layers of the ground. In the process, the soil starts getting penetrated into this mold, and once you ensure that the complete full depth penetration of your mold is done into the ground, then surrounding soil you can try to excavate and you can take out your hollow cylindrical mold which got filled with your soil. Then that particular cylindrical mold, maybe on the top and bottom of that mold, you might have some extra projection of the soil. Try to properly cut it and trim it, both on top as well as on the bottom. You have to ensure that the soil which got collected in the hollow cylindrical mold should be exactly equal to the volume of the mold only. No extra projection on top and as well as on the bottom of the mold. You should not see any extra projected volume of the soil. So you have to properly cut that extra projections of the soil. And now my objective is to ultimately calculate what is the dry density of the soil, or your dry unit weight of the soil, which is compacted in the field. So if I want to get this dry unit weight, then once again dry unit weight is nothing but bulk unit weight by 1 plus W. So what is bulk unit weight? How do I calculate this bulk unit weight? Once again the same story. I am going to determine the weight of the soil which got collected in that hollow cylindrical mold. Initially itself, if I can take the weight of that mold in which I am going to carry out my test. So empty weight of the mold I know. After collecting the soil sample, if I can measure the weight again, then I am going to get the weight of the soil sample along with the mold. From initial weight of the mold, if I can subtract, then I can get what is the weight of the soil sample which got collected in the mold. So weight of the soil sample got collected in the mold is known, divided by what is the volume of the soil which got collected in the mold. So how much volume of the soil is getting collected in the mold? It is equal to the volume of that empty space which is available in the hollow cylindrical mold space. So volume of the soil is equal to the hollow cylindrical volume of the mold. So volume of the soil is nothing but volume of your mold. Weight of the soil, what is collected is known. Then you can say what is your bulk unit weight. Once the bulk unit weight is known, and if I can take a piece of soil sample what got collected in that particular hollow cylindrical mold, and if I can determine the corresponding water content present in that particular soil which got collected in the mold, then I can try to calculate what is the dry density of the soil, or how much density or how much dry density that you are achieving for that particular soil which is compacted in the field. Okay, so likewise we have got other tests like nuclear method and rubber balloon method. So this rubber balloon method is also sometimes commonly adopted in the field. So here in the case of this rubber balloon method also, as like in the case of sand replacement method, so even in the case of your rubber balloon method, we make an excavation, a small hole is what we try to make in the ground, and we'll have a kind of a rubber tube which we allow that rubber tube to be placed, a kind of a balloon basically, which is going to be placed inside that hole, and from top we'll be supplying the water into that particular rubber balloon. And as you supply the water into that rubber balloon, what is going to happen is the balloon inside the hole starts getting bulged. And what is going to happen in the process? Whatever is the empty portion, let me just represent here. Let's say I have excavated the soil here, and inside this I am placing your balloon, and from top I am supplying it with some known quantity of volume of water which is being pumped into that balloon. So in the process, what is going to happen is, as you continuously supply the water, because of that pressure of water, as this balloon thickness is relatively less, then the balloon starts bulging and it occupies the exact volume of this particular pit which you have excavated. Okay, so once you understand how much volume of water was required to ensure that your balloon is completely occupying the volume of that particular pit which you have excavated, so once that volume of that water replaced into the balloon to completely occupy that pit which you have excavated is known. So volume of that pit is known, and how much is the weight of the soil which you have excavated out is known. So weight by volume gives you what is called as your unit weight of the soil, bulk unit weight of the soil. And if I can measure what is the moisture content present in that particular soil, then I can get what is your dry unit weight of that particular soil which is compacted in the field. So likewise, you have got your nuclear method also, which is not very commonly seen in the field where people carry out those tests. Okay, but however, it is an easy test as similar to that of these tests. But more commonly used tests are your core cutter method test or sand replacement method test. So it depends on soil condition also, because this core cutter mold or core cutter method test, you cannot make use of this particular test in the case of your gravelly soil deposits or maybe coarse grain soil deposits in greater extent. Why? Because whenever you try to push this core cutter mold into the ground, what you have is, if you have your coarse grain gravelly particles coming in contact with that mold when it is being pushed, so all possibilities are that your mold at its bottom gets damaged because of the presence of those coarse grain particles or gravel particles, which may not allow your mold to get penetrated easily into the ground. So if mold is not going easily into the ground, what we do, we give more and more loading from the top to push this mold. But what is exactly happening here? There is a gravel particle which is not allowing your mold to get pushed easily into the ground, certainly causing the damage to the mold. And that's the reason why we say core cutter mold or core cutter method is not very effective in the case of your coarse grain soil or gravelly soil deposits. Another problem is that, though if it is a sandy soil in which I can easily push your core cutter mold inside the ground, but while I am taking out that core cutter mold out from the ground, when I am trying to lift that mold, when I am going to take out that mold from the ground, what is going to happen is, in case the sand particles are relatively in a dry state, what could be the condition that you see? As you lift the mold, the particles from inside the mold starts easily falling down, and you will not be able to measure how much is the weight of that soil particles that you have collected and so on. So it's not going to be a proper technique in the case of your coarse grain soil or maybe in the case of your gravelly soil deposits. So core cutter method, we say it's not relatively very effective in such kind of soil deposits. So it depends on type of soil, depending on the accuracy what you are looking at. You have got different other equipments or methods by which you can try to determine the field density of the soil sample, what is being compacted. So once I understand what is the field density of that compacted soil, then I can understand whether I have achieved a relative compaction of minimum 90 to 95% of my targeted compaction. So if that is not achieved, then go on to continue your compaction process until you achieve your targeted compaction, what you want for that soil in the field. So that's how we go ahead in carrying out your compaction in the field. So I'm just giving you one example here where I would expect you to just solve it. And what is given here is some test results from your standard Proctor test are given. So volume of the Proctor mold is mentioned, and what is given is mass of wet soil in kgs is given, and the respective water content. Let's say when the mass of the wet soil in that mold existing is 1.68 kg, the corresponding water content is 9.9%. When the weight of the soil sample in the mold, in that Proctor compacted mold is 1.71 kg, the corresponding water content is 10.6%. So once you have your respective water content and the weights, then if weight is known, anyhow the volume of the mold is standard volume. So what I can say is here, I can try to find out what is called as your bulk unit weight. So how do we calculate the bulk unit weight? Or bulk density. Here the data is in kg. Okay, so I am going to be talking in terms of the density. So how do we calculate this bulk density? Bulk density is nothing but mass of soil divided by the volume of soil compacted in the mold, or I can say the volume of your mold. Okay, so let's say the mass of the soil in case 1 is 1.68 kg divided by the volume of that mold is 944. Then I'll be getting some bulk density value which is in kg per centimeter cube. Likewise, second time I have added some more water content to the soil, I have further compacted it, then I got some other bulk unit weight and so on. So for different bulk unit weight values, already for case 1 you have respective water content. In that sense, I know the bulk unit weight. Then from this known bulk unit weight value, I can try to get your dry unit weight value. Okay, a dry density value. So for case 1, case 2, case 3, case 4, case 5 and so on, once I have all that particular data, then we know that we can go on to plot a graph as like what we have talked in our previous class. So we will be indicating what is called as water content on the horizontal axis and your dry density on your vertical axis. Here I am trying to talk about density, so I am indicating it as rho d. So for different water contents, you are getting different dry density values, and when you are going to be plotting a graph, maybe you will be getting a graph like this. It's a rough graph what I have plotted. Don't worry, why is the curve like this? From this graph, what is that our ultimate objective is? Our ultimate objective, what we are looking at or what we are interested in getting is finding out what is the maximum dry density which we are achieving it for a water content which is called as your optimum moisture content. Okay, so that is what is actually asked in the problem. So you are required to plot your compaction curve from which you can determine what is the maximum dry density that you are achieving for that particular soil for the corresponding optimum moisture content. Okay, and what is also asked is you are also asked to determine the moisture content. Okay, so you are also asked to determine how much is the moisture content that is required to achieve 95% of your gamma D max. Let's say, let me go back to that compaction curve again. Water content on the horizontal axis, gamma D on the vertical axis. This was your compaction curve, and we said this point curve refers to that of your gamma D max or rho D max for the corresponding OMC. Once I know what is my maximum dry density, so for achieving 95% of your maximum dry density means, so this is what is called as 100% of your maximum dry density value. So 95% means some value here you might be looking at. So for that corresponding 95% of dry density, I can go back onto your compaction curve and then I can say what is the relevant corresponding water content that I am required to add to your soil so that you get what is called as your 95% of maximum dry density in that particular soil. Okay, so that's how you can go ahead in solving your problem. So you will have 2 different cases of water contents. I repeat, you'll have 2 different cases of water contents. One is on the left side of your optimum, the other is on the right side of your optimum. Okay, so on the left side of your optimum also, for this much water content, you will be getting the 95% of your maximum dry density. When the water content added is on right side of your optimum moisture content also, for that water content also, you will be getting what is called as your 95% of your maximum dry density. So this left side region of your water content is left side region of your optimum moisture content, we call it as dry side of OMC, whereas the right side of this OMC, the region corresponding to the right side of OMC, we call it as wet side of OMC. Okay, the portion of your compaction curve which is there onto the left of your OMC, we call it as dry side of OMC, and portion of the compaction curve which you have got on the right side of your OMC, which we call it as your wet side of your OMC. Okay, so that's how I can solve this particular problem, whatever is given here. Okay, so thank you all for your patience listening, and in the next class we'll start talking with our next topic, that is compressibility and consolidation.